Let's start with you providing a background for our viewers to understand the concept of foreign direct investment. Give us a background into that and then talk about the significance to economic growth when it comes to Nigeria as a case study.
Let's start by looking at uh, uh, let's look at by looking at the concept of itself, the foreign direct investment, because you found out that a lot of countries, people see countries that have developed so far, countries like Singapore and countries like India and maybe countries like China. Some will argue that, okay, they had an in-house policy, or let's say a closed economy that they were able to develop. But if you look at most of the countries, you find out that when you talk about development, and when you talk about uh, when you talk about economic development, you find out that that only happens when you have so much distant foreign direct investment. And this is to tell you that countries that don't have, or that countries that rely, if you don't have local technology that can actually supply or provide all the needs that you have for this and for your citizens, then you have to rely on this foreign direct investment. So foreign direct investment simply means the let's say the amount of funds or resources that comes into your country that in one way or the other helps in developing or building up your economy. And that can be in form of funding, and that can be in form of let's say brain and resources that can be able to use to develop a country in one way or the other. And we have seen other states have already done so much in Nigeria in that regard. A very good example of states that we have that have done so much when it comes to foreign direct investment is Lagos State and Kaduna State. We have seen an example whereby uh, before much of the foreign investment of the FDI earnings in the states like Kaduna, before Kaduna was not even ranked among the states that actually used to generate revenue. But as of now and as of today, due to foreign direct investment, a state like Kaduna State might not necessarily need, let's say, a federal allocation for them to be able to, let's say, pay salaries or carry out some of the projects because of the number of uh, projects, because of the number of foreign direct investment, the number of foreign companies that were able to operate or open in Kaduna from 2015 to, let's say, to date.
All right, let's look at the peculiarity about Nigeria. If you look at the statistics for 2022, there's a decline about 105% when it comes to foreign direct investment compared to the statistics for 2021. What do you think is largely responsible for this decline when it comes to foreign direct investment, looking at Nigeria as a case study in recent time?
Well, if you look at some of the what actually happened, there are quite about I think 5 to 6 points that I'm going to talk about, and one of the actual things that happened is there was this instability. What I mean instability, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a political instability, but there were so much security issues, especially when it comes to in 2022. So those security issues, actually, we have seen the resurgence of, let's say, insurgency activities and, let's say, separatist activities in the southeast. And if you look at the northwest and mostly, especially at the oil regions, there have been resurgence of kidnappings. And apart from that, in the northwest, you found out that a lot of construction workers and, let's say, miners and all kind of people that you think will come and work on uh, on projects like this, or, let's say, that's going to bring foreign direct investment. So that threat, that security threat, is what actually, let's say, affected most of the activities that actually happened. So the political instability and security issues is one of the factors that led to that. And also, you found out that there is this issue that has to do with most of the transport and energy infrastructure that we have. They are in very poor and vegetative state, in such a way that they found out that in such a way that if there is lack of electricity, if there's lack of electricity, you found out that it's going to result to a high cost of, let's say, operations for businesses. And if you look at in 2022 alone, the number of times that the national grid collapsed is so alarming at the rate of uh, more than, I think, 22 times or thereabout. So that is not looking good for this enough for foreign direct investors. And there was this element of very wide, let's say, corruption, especially when it comes to, let's say, agencies or regulators that will issue or make sure that this foreign investment happens. You find out that with that kind of challenge, if let's say a company or let's say an investor comes to Nigeria just for him to seek license or for him to get a land that is going to establish a factory or a company, then that means he has to, let's say, pay a bribe. So if someone has to pay a bribe, that is going to erode the trust and confidence of any investor, and is going to and even if investors come to that, they find that it's going to make the cost of business or operating that company to become very, very expensive. And you find out that there is a lot of tax burden. Sometimes they will tell these investors that, okay, we are giving you a tax break, or we're going to issue you a tax break. But whenever there is a change of administration, either at the center or at subnational level, then you find out that the other administration will not come in. So that due to the lack of that political, let's say, stability, so there's going to be high tax burden, and that is going to reduce the profitability of even the profitability of the listen of the company that's operating. Then also we have seen in the year 2022, we have seen the devaluation of the naira against the dollar that actually contributed. Though a lot of people think that if the naira is devalued, if the naira is devalued, there are a lot of foreign investors will not come in due to exchange rate and all that. But even if they come in with the devaluation of naira, you find out that the cost of production, labor, and other things is really going to affect them. This will affect them so much. And at times, you find out that there's this import restrictions. Uh, Import restriction in such a way that Nigeria at times have a lot of, let's say, some of these trade barriers. So these trade barriers and import restrictions has always limited, let's say, the access and the competitiveness of foreign investors in Nigeria. So we have seen a situation whereby there was this local content, let's say, policy that was issued by the federal government during Buhari's regime. So you found out that in that local content policy, let's say an investor or a company that is coming to invest in Nigeria will be told, okay, yeah, it's a local content policy. You have to source your materials here. You have to you have to use all the expertise that are available in Nigeria. Whereby sometimes you find out that the companies will be able to set up a factory, especially it happens in Jigawa and Kaduna, and even in Ogun State. You find out that the local farmers that we have will not be able to let's say, provide that particular factory or that particular investor with the necessary raw materials that the person needs to with the necessary raw materials that the company is supposed to use for production. So if there's a limit if there's a trade barrier or there's let's say an import restriction or raw materials, you find out that it's either the company has to change to another product or the company has to shut down completely. So, and lastly, we have I wouldn't say inefficient judicial system, but sometimes there is this unreliable dispute settlement mechanism, whereby whenever the judicial system has made it or shown a way that, okay, if there's any dispute that is going to be settled, or the judicial dispute that is going to be settled between a foreigner and, let's say, a Nigerian, or between two foreigners, let's say bad elements or corrupt elements among or in the judicial system normally take advantage of that. And when they take advantage of that, then there will be element of widespread corruption. And so that actually creates let's say when you have an efficient judicial system and a reliable dispute mechanism, it's definitely going to create like uncertainty, and is going to discourage investors from, let's say, entering Nigeria or even expanding some of the let's say activities that they do have. So I feel those are some of the let's say risks or some of the challenge. But the two most important ones are, there has to be political and security stability, and as well as there has to be let's say issue that has to do with power. So without efficient electricity and without efficient energy, we'll be seeing so much decline when it comes to let's say foreign direct investment in Nigeria.
Okay, now, in spite some of these challenges that you've highlighted, you discover that investors or international investors are still taking interest in Africa, most importantly, a country like Nigeria. There's this perception that Africa is taking, is the new frontier when it comes to emerging markets. Nigeria is taking the front seat. Why do you think international investors are still interested in committing their FDI to Nigerian economy, for instance, in spite of these challenges that you've highlighted?
Well, like Nigeria is blessed. Is a land of let's say opportunities and economic opportunities. If you look at the population of Nigeria, like we have the labor and we have the workforce. And mostly if you look at the going forward, let's say the technology companies that produce, let's say tech gadgets and equipment, let's say lithium batteries and all that, what is the future of tech? Or what is the future of, let's say, energy? Because people are using electric cars globally. So it will be, let's say, cost effective and cheap to set up a factory in, let's say, in somewhere in Kaduna or in Benue or in Nasarawa states, than to set up a factory somewhere in Texas. So the opportunity that Nigeria has, apart from the, let's say, the workforce or the very young and energetic population of the youth, we also have most of the resources that factories worldwide actually need to set up, let's say, a factory, be it in, let's say, agriculture, be it, let's say, in technology, and even in manufacturing. So now having this project, there is this AKK gas pipeline that stretches across, let's say from Port Harcourt down to, let's say, to Kogi State, down to Kaduna, down to Kano, to Dara, and even down to Niger Republic. So and even up to down to, let's say, to Morocco. These are some of the issues, or these are some of the opportunities, and these are the advantages that Nigeria has over most of the, or let's say even all the West African nation. And let's say the nations going forward, Nigeria is still, let's say, young, democratically, especially if you look at where being in the Fourth Republic, starting from 1999, just like we are less than 30 years when it comes to that. So the kind of, let's say, opportunities and the kind of stability that is incoming, uh, let's say people see the kind of leadership that we're going to have in the nearest future. So there is still hope, and there is still, let's say, chance and, let's say, availabilities to address let's say, the challenges that I've mentioned earlier. So investors are looking at both the, let's say, the labor, the availability of the youth, and the, let's say, tech-savvy populations that we have in Nigeria. And apart from that, they're looking at even the let's say, the capital. Like Nigeria is quite, the capital for you to start or open a business or factory in Nigeria is still let's say very affordable compared to, let's say, other foreign countries that you can go to. And hopefully looking at the listen out the crop of let's say leadership that we have or that we're going to have in the future, there is still hope that having, let's say, the right leadership in the nearest future will actually, let's say, make, let's say, factories or the economy, especially the manufacturing sector, to become let's say, the leading manufacturing, let's say, sector in Africa. So there's still hope. So those are some of the things that the let's say, foreign investors do look at and still invest their money in Nigeria. So it's simply just let's say the young, the youth that we have, the population whereby you have over 100 million, then you have, let's say, apart from the youth, we also have the resources that are needed to, uh, let's say, that are needed for these companies to come and listen and establish their factories or investments in Nigeria.
All right. President Tinubu will be attending, the Saudi African Summit to seek for international investors. And interestingly, is the chairman of ECOWAS. How do you think he can take advantage of a forum like this where you're going to have other heads of states, other presidents, and then being the chairman of ECOWAS? How do you think he can take advantage of a forum like this to attract foreign investors to Nigeria? If you're in position to advise him, he's going to be at that forum, what would be your recommendation?
Yeah, so for the president being at that kind of very high level stake and chairing the ECOWAS Committee of Nations in that kind of, let's say, Saudi African summit, the president should use this as an opportunity to, let's say, foreign investors, especially in the oil and gas sector. And one of the things that I'm going to, let's say, advise, if I am to advise the president, you should look at, companies like the Saudi Aramco. Is a $2 trillion company and is a national oil company for the Saudi. Let's say, look at their blueprint, look at their template, and see how that can be applied to Nigeria, especially the oil-rich communities of the Niger Delta. Uh, they deserve they deserve all kind of government attention, especially when it comes to environment and all that. And I believe if the federal government is able to do the right thing at those host communities in the Niger Delta, there will be more when it comes to foreign direct investment, and there will be more when it comes to human capital development in that region and the country as a whole. Another thing that the president should look at is the possibility of turning around our refineries. And what I mean by turning around our refineries, if you look at Saudi Arabia, the kind of refineries that they have, and even most of the member nations that are going to attend that conference, you find out that majority of them, their refineries are up and working. So why ours in Nigeria are not up and running, despite the billions of dollars that were sunk into those refineries just for turnaround maintenance. The amount of money spent on those refineries can be used to build new refineries that are more effective, that are more technological and more modern. So this is the opportunity for the president to interact with the global community, especially the oil and gas, this oil and gas community, and he should look at the possibility of bringing a lot of foreign direct investors. And I'm very sure in a trip like this, the president will definitely travel with let's say, with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the NNPC head and any other person that the upstream and the downstream sector of the let's say the leaders of the upstream and the downstream sector of the, let's say, of the petroleum industry, so that they see and interact with these people, especially when it comes to, let's say, the foreign direct investment. And another advice I would really advise the president is looking at let's say, if you look at the political economy and the geopolitics of what is happening in, let's say, in the Middle East, this is the best opportunity for Nigeria to, uh, let's say, to step in and close some of the gaps, especially when it comes to the supply of gas to illicit Europe and some of the Asian countries. So it's a very good opportunity for Mr. President and even a very good opportunity for Nigeria for let's say for the president to meet and let's say engage these stakeholders, especially when it comes to oil and gas, and which is actually going to improve the foreign direct investment to Nigeria, especially at the oil and gas sector.
Okay, great. You earlier talked about the significance of FDI. You know, there are two sides to a coin. You know, you talk about the importance, you know, the impact of on economic growth and development. Are there other, you know, things or that has to do with disadvantages when it comes to foreign direct investment, looking at the economy of Nigeria? What could be the negative impact of that if you think that can have a negative impact on the economy?
Well, I would say it's yes, for every aspect you look at it, there's a positive, there's an advantage and advantage to that. But it's just that we really have to look at the let's say when it comes to we should do that, especially for transfer of technology, because you found out that we have seen areas or we have seen activities that happen in Bangladesh, whereby they open their doors to also this foreign direct investments, especially let's say for the giant of Asia, let's say the Chinese or the let's say Chinese let's say companies came, but you found out that there is no, let's say, local content, whereby most of the, let's say, most of the positions that are going to be held in, let's say, in factories or in companies, you found out that there are, uh, I believe, any expertise or any technology that you're looking for in Nigeria when it comes to productions, when it comes to robotics, when it comes to agriculture, definitely there is a Nigerian that has the capacity and the brain to do or to carry out that kind of, let's say, so the only thing that the government is going to look at, uh, the foreign direct investment shouldn't be, let's say, an avenue for job displacement in Nigeria. And what I mean job displacement, job displacement here means, okay, don't just say that, okay, we bring in foreign investors to the countries and they will now come and establish factories. Instead of our youth or our children, for them to get work in those factories, we end up having, let's say, foreigner being the security of a company that is being established in Nigeria. So some of the things that the government is going to look at, because we have seen it in other countries whereby the foreign investor will not come. Even water that is going to drink in the factory will not be from that host country that he's being into. So we should avoid that in Nigeria. And also, I believe we should have countries, let's say we should have factories or foreign investors that are going to support local production. And let's say not just come in, because when you have a company that comes into Nigeria, the company will now be the one to have their farm, and the company will be the one to have their logistics, let's say, fleet that is going to move products, let's say the supply chain. So what we are looking for is that the foreign direct investment that Nigeria is looking for, they are just foreign direct investors that are going to fund local production. Or even if they're not going to fund the local production, they should just provide platforms for, let's say, for exports or for, let's say, processing finished products. So those are the things that we are not looking at well, one of the major disadvantages of foreign direct investment we have seen in other countries that have done that is, especially in Africa, is job displacement. And we don't want that in Nigeria. So the government should put all mechanisms in place to ensure that as lucrative as foreign direct investment is, it shouldn't lead to job displacements.
All right, let's look at the case study of India. Recently, India has to relax its FDI regulations to allow 100% foreign direct investment in a single train without government approval. Now, what kind of policy are you expecting from the federal government to ensure it makes it easier for international investors to take interest in investing in Nigeria to improve the FDI regulations in Nigeria? What kind of policy are you expecting from the government?
Listen, so for the government, I'm expecting, let's say, I'm expecting a regulation or let's say a policy where the government itself, uh, though, yeah, as I said, it's quite lucrative to have these foreign direct investors. Then we should look at there are possibilities that, or let's say there are issues or areas that are very of or that are of national importance, especially when it comes to let's say national stability, let's say national security. Those are the areas that the government should look into. Just regulation, and what I mean regulation that are going to be advantageous and are going to be beneficial to the country. Nigeria is a very volatile country, very diverse country when it comes to uh, let's say one part of the let's say one part of the country being loyal to let's say an economic bloc of the world, and another part of the country being let's say loyal to another economic let's say bloc of the of the world. So if you look at our foreign policy, Nigeria accepts each and every individual. We have no we neither belong to the allies, we neither belong to the axis. So, but that shouldn't mean that okay, Nigeria should open its doors to each and every person that feel that okay, let him come and invest in Nigeria. If you look at each and every country, each most of the countries that we have or that are the global, let's say global arena when it comes to foreign direct investment, we should look at our national interest first. We have our own values as a nation, and we have our own interests economically and politically, and even when it comes to geopolitics. So we should always be looking at, let's say, our interests as a nation before any other thing else.
You will agree with me that FDI is a proper way of increasing revenue. Now, I would like you to advise the federal government on the best way to utilize those funds, coming in foreign currencies. We've had this opportunity over the years, but the issue of management has been of concern. So what do you think the federal government should do this time around to change the narrative and ensure that these funds are, used for the purpose intended?
Well, the only thing that the federal government should do, first thing is that for the government to ensure political stability and also to ensure security, because this kind of insurgencies going on is not will not help matters. And in addition to that, the government should ensure that it has stamped corruption or reduced corruption to the barest minimum when it comes to activities related to foreign direct investment. Because when there is absolutely zero or barest, let's say, minimum when it comes to corruption, there's going to be trust and confidence of, let's say, of these investors, and it's going to increase the ease of doing business. Then also I would advise the federal government that whenever it does, there should be, let's say, sustainability models for that. Because we have seen a situation whereby in states, a governor is going to sign an MOU with a foreign direct investor that is going to benefit the state and going to benefit the country as a, let's say, in general or at large. But when that governor leaves power and another person comes, maybe he's even within the same party or let's say a different political party, you find out that that governor will now suspend or let's say just decide to abandon that particular project, especially when it comes to foreign direct investment. So there has to be a policy that's going to ensure sustainability when it comes to anything related to foreign direct investment.
I would like you to conclude your thought on what the federal government needs to do in order to improve the investment climate in Nigeria, for foreign investors to come in, and see Nigeria as the necessary country of interest. The federal government must put some things in place. So I would like you to conclude your talk in that regard on what the federal government can do to improve the investment climate in Nigeria.
Well, if you look at the let's say the country itself, there's simple solution to this. Now, there are simple solutions to this. And one of the, this now, some of the things that the federal government actually needs to do, it has to do with this now, with the transport, or let's say the infrastructure. And what I mean the infrastructure, and what I mean by infrastructure here is that you found out that the moment this now the federal government improves the transportation and let's say energy infrastructure, especially the power supply, so it's going to first it's going to reduce the this now the say the cost of operation, and it's going to increase productivity. Because now if you have a factory somewhere in let's say in a village in Kebbi or in a village somewhere in Kwara, for you to transport large amount of let's say of the products, it's going to be very difficult because the railway network system in Nigeria is still not inclusive. What I mean inclusive is that many parts of the country are left out when it comes to this say let's say railway transport, and most of the times you find out that for you to move let's say for you to move goods, let's say goods, especially after being produced, using roads most of the time is not this is not ideal. So the railway would have been better to transport, let's say this product, or let's say these productions from where they are produced down to, let's say now to the seaport. Then another thing is that another thing, my conclusive thought on this is about reforming the judicial system, whereby this now the federal government should ensure that it has reformed some of the activities within the judicial system, especially when it comes to let's say resolving, or let's say the dispute mechanism. So this is going to create, like, let's say this transparent, legal, let's say unpredictable environment for investor. Because if there is any legal dispute between the investor and the government, or between the investor and another, let's say an employee in Nigeria, the investor should be guaranteed that, okay, justice is going to be done without having to pay a bribe or another thing. Then another thing also, there should be, let's say, a uniform tax between the states and the federal government. Though there was this joint tax board by the federal government, whereby, uh, let's say, when you pay at the center, then you have paid for all. But we have seen some of those activities are not being respected, and some of these policies are not being respected, especially at the state level. So where you have a foreign direct investor that he comes, and when he comes, you find out that there will be multiple taxations, or let's say there will be a lot of tax burden, let's say on the activities. Then another aspect we should look at is about, let's say, combating corruption, or let's say reducing corruption to the barest minimum. So when you when you reduce corruption to the barest minimum, this is going to promote, let's say, good governance. And when you promote good governance, there will be it's going to restore the trust and confidence in the investors, and it's going to definitely lower the cost of let's say doing business in Nigeria, and it's going to simply let's say simplify and improve let's say profitability, and it's going to make this and now the environment for foreign direct investment to become let's say very attractive for, let's say for foreign direct investors. Then also, earlier I talked about issue that has to do with restrictions. So just like the way you cited with the example of India, Nigeria should also be looking at the possibility of, let's say, removing import restriction, especially when it comes to raw materials that are being used, let's say, in production. That is going to increase the, let's say, the access and competitiveness of these foreign direct investors in Nigeria. Then lastly, I think it has to do with the political and, let's say, political stability, security, and peace. Because all the things that we have discussed about, without, let's say, political stability, and without, let's say, security and peace, let's say, foreign direct investors, how would you be able to protect the safety and the operations of these, let's say, foreign direct investors? So, because whenever they are coming in, they are not just coming in just with themselves and their suits, but they are coming in with their assets and their investments. So it's only when there's political stability, sustainability model, let's say security and peace, that is the only way you can be able to boost the confidence of any foreign investor to come to your country and invest. Because no investor will come to a country and at the end of the day, he set up a factory of, let's say, after spending $50 million or $50 million on a factory, and the next day it gets bounced down, or his workers are being kidnapped. So these are some of the things that these are some of my, let's say, concluding thoughts.